Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session on making IoT real across industries. My name is Nathan. I'm the Chief Technology Strategist for the Central Region in Breadhat. I have the privilege of having representation from multiple customers across different industries on the panel today. And we're going to be telling you a story around IoT. You will hear experiences that customers have in their domain around IoT about how can we actually realize value, make a difference? How can the layperson on the street actually experience IoT? So you will hear different aspects of that. And I have the privilege of having the distinguished panelists today to introduce themselves first, and then we will get into the discussion. Heads up, you will see a chair, open space, empty, because we are actually anticipating one more panelist who is not here, but I'm sure James will show up anytime. So please go ahead, Eric.
Thanks. My name is Eric Ensminger. I'm the Managing Director of IT for Customer Service Delivery at United Airlines. Essentially all of the day of operations that you guys see when you fly with us. So for those of you who are loyal 1Ks and gold numbers, we really appreciate your business.
I'm Chadwick Furman. I am the technology architect or tech evangelist for Exxon Mobile. So I work within the company to make sure that people understand the technologies that are coming and to make sure that we're keeping up to the pace of technology, which, you know, on the 6-month cadence that we're on these days is a tough job.
Hello everyone, my name is Ravi Kaniganti and I work as part of strategic marketing team at Zebra Technologies, and I take care of the retail vertical. And Zebra provides visibility into operations through our software, hardware, and services. And basically using a simple framework of sense, analyze, and act, we kind of sense what's happening at the edge, analyze, and provide that information so that the business can make right decisions.
So if you think about it, you know, you have representation on the stage. You know, picture a day in your life. You are putting gas in your car, going to a retail store, on the way to the airport to catch a flight. You have all three represented on stage. And believe it or not, IoT touches you in some different, you know, shapes and forms. And with that, let me introduce James Kirkland from Breadhat. You know, you get a special welcome, James. So please come on board. And so yeah, please join us. And so James will need to get mic'd up here.
I just did it.
We haven't. We do things in flight, you know, we are very agile. So.
We're agile.
Exactly. So while James gets mic'd up, yes, let me start with, you know, a basic question. So IoT is looked at as a technology, but then I assert if it doesn't actually enable a solution, a business solution, what good is that technology? So my question to the panelists is, you know, what is IoT? Do you see that as a technology or a solution?
Yes.
Okay, that's a great start. So can you elaborate on that, Chad?
I mean, it's all the above. I mean, we've been pulling data from anywhere from sensors in the field to sensors in the airlines to sensors in the retail market. I mean, you pull that data, but then understanding what you're going to do with that data is a whole nother thing. A lot of that data is junk.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely both as well. From our perspective, as we continue to kind of build out what our infrastructure looks like, there's a lot of what we often refer to as digital exhaust, which is just kind of gets blown off the backside because it's not relevant or we don't know how to handle it effectively or we don't think it's valuable to capture yet. But it's also the technology and enablement of that is absolutely key.
In my opinion, I think I kind of agree with what other panelists said, and more than anything, like IoT is a solution to me. The reason is it's not single technology. You need to have, you know, the sensors, you need to have the analysis to be done on it, and then your cloud comes into picture, and then, you know, again, presentation of that in the form of what actions you can take. So it's like a complete solution. So you cannot just put a sensor and capture the data and think that, you know, I have an IoT, you know. So it's more than that.
Yeah, make the data usable for your business partners.
With IoT, build it and they will come is not going to happen. IoT is, you've got to identify the business problems that you are solving and determine the ROI on those things, and then determine whether you're going to build a point solution to solve that problem, whether you're going to try to build some sort of platform to solve multiple problems. But you've got to be ready. I can't tell you how many customers I've talked to that they build this platform to gather this data and they can't tell the signal from the noise.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have a lot of purpose and really know what you're doing, and it's really important to have access to good data scientists as you're designing, and not just once you have this big pool of data that you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So how is it getting manifested across the industries, IoT? So, we have a multitude of industries. I will tell you, there may be industries that are obvious to you just by the logo names, but trust me, there are, they do touch other industries that we may not be as intelligent about. So just your perspective on how is IoT getting manifested in different industries, Eric?
Sure. At United Airlines, I'll give you two very quick examples that you've actually all experienced but you don't know about, is that on every one of our flights we actually have a medical kit, and that medical kit has things that expire in there because there's drugs and other pieces of things that if there's an emergency in flight, they actually can help you. One of the things is we've actually put RFID tags on there so that we can actually digitally monitor whether those kits are up to date or not without somebody having to go up into the overhead bin, pulling it out, and then physically checking each one of the pieces for them for compliance. The second one is actually most of our life vests at this point are also, what people don't know is a life vest actually expires. It has a 2-year lifespan. And one of our things that from a safety perspective is we need to make sure that we don't have expired life vests on our planes. Hopefully we never need to use them to begin with. But the way that we used to collect that data is somebody had to physically go through each seat and actually look at the date on each one of the vests. Nowadays, those are RFID enabled, and they could walk through with a device and actually see which ones they may need to replace. Ideally, they're all on the same cycle, but what happens is that one gets pulled out, one gets off cycle or whatever, and all of a sudden we're out of compliance. And so we've made that process super easy for our cleaning crews to be able to do the validation of that data, essentially.
Let me just tell you, I feel a whole lot safer and healthier. Chad.
So really in kind of following the model of the safety thing. Safety is one of the biggest things at Exxon Mobile. It's the very first thing you'll hear if you ever come to visit. There's always a safety minute. There's always safety briefings. And one of the big safety things we have dealing in oil and gas, and oil being flammable, is we actually keep sensors on everybody. And that sensor data is actually tracked, and we keep track of not only the levels, but where they are within the facilities.
Talking from a Zebra experience, right? So basically, Zebra serves 4 verticals: retail, transportation and logistics, healthcare, and manufacturing. And in all the 4 verticals, we are seeing, use of IoT. So I'll touch base mainly on 2 verticals, that is retail and the transportation and logistics. In retail, like for example, again, RFID is used primarily for inventory management. Again, that's one of the earlier IoT kind of a solution. But I think more and more you are seeing more beacons being used for location services, and also the refrigerators that are in the grocery and the super centers. They are all IoT enabled so that they know the freshness of a refrigerator and what's stored inside it, and when are they going to get expired. All that information is coming right now through IoT. And of course, the customers who are coming into the stores, you need a lot of information on who are coming, how many people are coming, which departments that they're going, and also the dwell time, how much time they're spending in front of a 40-inch screen TV, for example. That's an important information for an electronic retailer. And because of that data, they get immediately an alert on their mobile computer saying that, hey, by the way, a customer is in front of 40-inch TV for maybe 2-3 minutes. Maybe you should just politely go and ask if they need any help, right? So they're basically completing the loop of the sense, analyze, and act comes towards that use case, right? Then other thing that we are doing is that the whole fitting room analytics, like how, especially in apparel industry, what is moving into the fitting room, and is it showing up in the POS? Like, what's happening in the fitting room? I think that's a very good, important information for brands and manufacturers to know, hey, there is something that they need to change, right? Why is it not showing up in the POS if they are trying it on, right? So that is information. Then from a supply chain perspective, I think, again, going back to food safety, the temperature tracking of the trucks, I think traditionally that has been a data logger, which is like a dumb device, which will not be, showing the data. What happens, like, a truck coming from, let us say, California to Chicago, the driver can turn it off, or there could be some malfunction, but by the time they come to Chicago, they might have fixed the problem. But what happened in between, the data logger loses the track. But with IoT now coming into picture, we are able to now track continuously and able to provide, whenever it goes above or below threshold, that we are able to say that, hey, by the way, this particular truckload or a pallet, depending upon where we tag, saying that, hey, this should not be used. So I think those are some of the use cases that are getting prominent.
So I will put a plug-in for, if you go to the ecosystem theater, we have at the AI IoT booth, you will see a demo of how we are doing asset tracking on trucks with working with eclipse.org. And James, go right ahead to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, all these verticals are active. We see a lot of Industry 4.0. We see a lot of supply chain, transportation, logistics, energy. And so, what we've done is we've gone into the Eclipse IoT working group and have been working with partners like Bosch, GE, Cloudera, Eurotech, and folks like that, to initially build individual projects to solve problems like dealing with particular protocols or having a way to do device management or data ingestion. But what we've been doing over the last year is beginning to integrate those into stacks so that you can take these stacks and then implement and essentially get a horizontal layer that's going to get you 75% of the functionality that you need. And then you can then customize that. And it's built on top of OpenShift so that you can run it on a laptop, you can run it on AWS, you can run it in your own private cloud so that it can run anywhere and you're not locked into execution environments. So we've been doing a lot of work in community. We've got different test beds like the trucking test bed that's asset tracking. We've got an Industry 4.0 demo that's predictive maintenance, which is a real growth area. You tend to see use cases that span these verticals: asset tracking, predictive maintenance, safety and security applications, where the particular use case are going to be somewhat different, but the base tools are very similar.
So in that thread, what you would have seen is solutions from the multiple industries enabled by technologies that James spoke to, validating the assertion that IoT is both a solution and a technology. I want to come back to safety. So when I actually did have a one-on-one conversation with each of the panelists, and Chad brought out safety from an Exxon Mobile perspective, but I want to add safety and security, because when we deal with IoT, we talk about data. When we talk about data, security comes to mind right away. So, perhaps when we say risk management, we tend to think about security from an IT perspective, but reality is safety matters too. So Chad, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on that combination of safety and security from an IoT standpoint when it comes to risk management.
Well, safety, security, compliance, how do you track all of these billions and billions of devices around the world? I mean, that's one of the biggest problems that I know in our industry, and I'm sure on both of your sides of the world. Just in one refinery, we could have billions upon billions of different sensors doing anything from pressure sensitivity to, rates of down to heart rate at this point. It's pretty intense how low of a level we go to there. And then I think you and I were talking about how there's also the compliance or kind of issue of people not wanting to be tracked and where they are on that. So there's a ton of different aspects to that. And it's kind of one of those things that I really want to reach out to a lot of the IoT community and ask them, how do we start handling this, and how do we kind of start collaborating on figuring out better ways to do these things? Because this is a new yet old space, especially for companies that have been around doing these kind of things for a while, but now there's kind of a cool, sexy name for it.
Yeah. So I'd like to add from a retail perspective, again, not from a data security point of view, but to provide the security of the inventory within the retail setting, right? So especially when you tag high value items with RFID tag, now we have a solution that can say that like somebody picked up a $300 Xbox or and started moving on that thing. We can actually track that using multiple sensors, like it could be RFID and a combination of video, and able to kind of continuously provide updates to the sales associate or to the security manager, saying that, hey, by the way, this high value item is on the move. And if it crosses certain imaginary lines of not going into the POS, but going into a restroom or a back door kind of a site, we can alert so that they can politely talk to the person if they need any help with the device, purchasing the device, right? So I think those are some of the things, like shrinkage is a big problem for retailers, and they're actually using IoT in the real-time data to kind of solve that problem.
If I remember right, you can even track the number of jeans a shopper is wearing, right?
Exactly. If they try on 3 jeans, we know that 3 tags are moving rather than 1 tag moving. So,
Eric, on.
Sure, I'll share an example where we've actually mashed up 2 different pieces of technology. We actually used LiDAR and then video feeds on the apron, which is where the planes pull into the gates. And what we've done there is we've allowed the people that you're used to seeing, which we call wing walkers, the people with the cones, to actually sit underneath. So if there's lightning storms going on within 5 miles of the airport, we don't allow them actually outside at that particular juncture. That's a huge problem for us because we'll actually still continue to land aircraft for various reasons, but traditionally they've been unable to gate them at that point. You guys have to sit out on the tarmac and wait for the lightning strikes to actually dissipate until we were going to bring them in. We've deployed some technology with LiDAR and then with video feeds that allow us to actually auto-gate, and it gives the availability for the pilot to pull into the gate using a green warning system. The LiDAR is actually looking at the field of view to make sure that it's safe to come into that area and then proceed. And if something actually changes while he's taxiing in, it will actually flip red and he'll stop the plane and then he'll wait until it clears. Hopefully it's somebody moving, or hopefully it's not somebody moving, but they'll address the situation and they can continue on. So from an employee safety perspective and from a passenger satisfaction perspective, those 2 things come together to run a better airline day to day, especially in the summertime for us.
So I want to go back to what Chad said about millions of sensors out there, and that translates to large volumes of data. Even large is like a euphemism for that. Given the volume of data we are talking about, my question is to you, Eric. Is it about data moves around? We migrate it whether we need to or not. It just keeps moving around, but it's really about getting access to the right data at the right time. Right. Can you elaborate on that, Eric?
Sure. I would say we kind of have, for us, I'd highlight probably 2 things. One of them is that we're looking at the data from a historical perspective. We talked a little bit about predictive maintenance. I'll give the example. All the airlines do this, which is when you receive your plane from the manufacturer, in this particular case, Boeing, there's a maintenance schedule that we have to follow. It needs to be serviced every 20 months or so forth, and then based on the data that we actually see once the aircraft is in service, then we can extend that by using data to prove that it doesn't need to be serviced every 20 months, it needs to be serviced every 24 months. And so that's an example of where I'd say we can do the historical analysis, which I think a lot of people probably either are doing or should be doing. One of our key challenges is what I'll call is the real-time data component of it. And if you think about what happens in the turn of an aircraft, if people may or may not know this, but you have 100 people physically supporting the turn of the aircraft between catering, baggage service people, there's gate agents, there's cleaning crews, and so forth. There's a ton of people that need to physically do their work. And how do you collect that data real time to see that there's a problem going on? And of those 100 people, only maybe 10 of them are United Airlines employees. The other 90 are contractors. They could be Swissport, they could be somebody with the airport authority or so forth. And so we're working across those work groups of how do you create a safe but efficient work environment as we turn the aircraft. And you need that information now this second, because I can't wait 10 minutes because that's a 10-minute delay and we run an on-time airline.
And the predictive maintenance is huge for us because if we're not maintaining certain things, I mean, there's definite safety issues that come into that. So we've actually used a ton of data analytics, data virtualization, Hadoop, things like that to actually not only tell us when and if things are going to break, but also to save a lot of money where people have thought that they needed to buy new things that they didn't necessarily need to buy. It's just a scheduling issue. I think you have similar.
Yeah. And I think, end of the day, I think, there could be a lot of data, as we talked about, if we don't really kind of slice and dice and make actionable insights into it and provide that information back to the edge worker. It could be a retail sales associate in a retail store, or it could be a warehouse manager in a warehouse, or a truck driver in case of a logistics. If you don't do that, then there is no, closed loop, and you don't get value. So what we do is that, again, now the examples that I have quoted earlier, is that we kind of process the data from the edge and then bring it back to the sales associate through the mobile device, so that they can actually act on it. So, and you need to kind of look at really slice and dice that data and use the analytic tools to make sure that you don't overwhelm with the end sales associate with a lot of data like a dashboard. That's no use to him or her, right? You need to really say, what is the next best action? Given what's happening in the environment, what's the next best action? And the information has to be very context aware, and it has to be pertinent to the situation. So that's what we are looking at, rather than just pushing all the data that we collect, but rather than saying that what's the best course of action that they need to take based upon this information.
So James, we talked about, multiple things came out in that exchange. There is data access, virtualizing data, slicing, dicing. What's the technology angle there? What's available today, and where are we?
You've got two streams of data. You've got real-time data that you're going to need to process through stream processing with analytic models so that you can act on that data. And then you've got the strategic, slow data that you're going to do batch analytics against to find new correlations. And be able to use that data, hopefully. So part of it is deciding what data at the device, at the gateway, and as it transits through the cloud and into the data storage, what you're going to keep when what data has value, what the lifetime of that data is. If you have a device that reports 0 for a nominal condition, and it reports 0 20,000 times, maybe you only need to send that every hour and just say it's been 0, and that you do exception-based reporting. There may also be an instance where when you go out of, the range may be 3 degrees, and if you go outside of that, then you begin report. You report with much more frequency. So you're looking for exceptions. Moving data just to move data into the cloud is expensive. The storage of that data is expensive. If you don't have, and you certainly, you can find use for this data later, but you can end up with a huge amount of data that's not. So what we do with our customers is use Fuse and rules engine to try to make decisions at that gateway about, do I run a rule that takes this data every minute and smushes all the stuff together into a Google protobuf and sends that up once a minute until we get an error, and then it sends me every data point every second. Do we calculate mean, median, mode every minute if we're in a nominal condition and send that data up? So it's about getting the data to the right place at the right time to make a decision. It's about getting just enough data to be statistically valid for the batch analytics. There's not enough especially for mobile, there's not enough bandwidth. The cost of that bandwidth is too expensive. And then for fixed locations, still transiting that data up has cost, has time components. And if you're not going to use it, the storage costs can become incalculable. So,
I want to tie back what James said. The rules that he referred to, the rules engine, is the Breadhat decision manager.
Yes.
And you would have, those of you who attended the keynote yesterday when Jim Whitehurst kicked it off, he actually referenced it. We have used that to plan 325 sessions at the summit. It is the same tool. So we are using it, and that's what you're referring to, James,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So James, to continue the thread, I go back to Chad's comment that he's really looking to having collaboration in the community to kind of evolve, right? I'm going to give a little context to how we operate for possibly some of you in the audience, I certainly hope all of you are well aware of that, but how Red Hat works with the open source community is to really have our employees be part of the community as contributors. That's what they do. That is their day job. And then we collaborate, we co-innovate, and then we bring that back into our platform to make it enterprise grade, to add product lifecycle management to it. We secure it. And that's when we make it available to customers like United Zebra, Exxon Mobile, and others. We then circle it back to the community. So it's not like we fork our own branch of the code and we run our own track. It is circled back. So there is continuous collaboration and innovation. With that context, James, can you elaborate on, from an IoT perspective, there are multiple technologies that are projects in flight in the open source community.
Yeah.
What's going on and where do you see it headed?
So there's a multitude of projects and organizations. Some are focused on standards, some are focused on implementation methodologies. Eclipse IoT working group that we work with is focused on solving particular problems in code and then creating test beds to show integration. So I think each one is solving its own range of problems. An example of what Red Hat typically does is, we'll go and we'll work with a customer and there may be a data format for energy or for whatever that they need supported. We work together and create a camel connector for that to either, transform into or out of that format. It doesn't necessarily make sense for Exxon Mobile to maintain this. We take that, it's donated to the community, to the camel community or whatever, and then we productize it and it becomes something that we maintain and support. So, our job is to work with customers, get their use cases, work in communities, either to document their use cases as requirements for the communities, or to get them to actively contribute, test code or whatever, test implementations, or even become members of the community and contribute things themselves so that we can then productize that, run it through our QA processes. So I think it's really important whether you're a user and you're participating just through discussion, creating documentation, sharing your use stories, or creating sample code, contributing. I think all of those provide value to the community because the more use cases that are represented and the more diversity in thought, the better the code base is going to be.
So coming back to Eric, Chad, and Ravi, I really would like to get your perspective on open source, the role of open source when it comes to IoT, and where are you as enterprises, individuals, teams that you work with? Chad, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can actually add on to exactly
yes,
what we were just talking about. So the OCSoft driver, we've been, the energy sector in general is very proprietary software based, and we get bottlenecked by that. We get stuck on old versions of RHEL and Oracle and different things like that because we have all these proprietary things that we have to use. But we've actually started contributing upstream on some of the Modbus drivers, as well as, the OCSoft stuff really is huge for us because that was data that was locked away that we had to use proprietary software to get to, and now we no longer have to do that. So we're embracing open source specifically in the IoT space because that's really going to be the way that we kind of see IoT going and working.
And why is that, Chad? The last part of what you just said.
Really, the collaborative nature of it. Really, what we use, what Ravi uses, what United uses, it's all, in the end of the day, just going to be open source code. Everything we're doing, whether it be an API, I think you were talking about how you guys call Twitter to find out things about what's going on in airports, and all of that's open source. It's all collaborative. It's all things that it's going to move so quickly, and it has to. And if we don't keep up with that and don't collaborate on it, and it becomes proprietary and closed source, I don't think IoT will actually be successful. We'll get right back into that proprietary software model.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to say makes enterprises more competitive that way.
Yeah. Competitive advantage is definitely a thing in my industry.
Okay.
And in every industry, really.
Yeah.
Did you talk about the Twitter thing, or?
I haven't talked about the Twitter thing, but so one of the things that we're doing is that we're doing some mashup work with people's Twitter feeds and location services. So if you use Twitter, you traditionally have your location services on. One of the things that we know is that not everything goes right at the airline, and occasionally we need some extra hands to help. And so if you're sitting in the gate and there starts to be a Twitter storm, or there starts to be some significant either negative or positive sentiment that happens, our ops control will actually call the local supervisors and then dispatch them into the gate area. Because chances are that the situation has maybe gone south and the gate agent hasn't taken the time to pick up the phone, but we can actually see that via social media, because we've actually geofenced each one of our hub airports in particular as a start to look at how do we effectively do that. That's open source code that we've tapped into. We're looking at that next layer of it as well, which is how do we do a better job of dispatch in that process. Right now we're still doing that manually because we're still learning a little bit, but I think eventually that'll come as an alert directly to the CS supervisor on staff to actually work. The other piece I'm just going to add in what Chad said is that for those of you who don't understand some of the airline complexity similar to Exxon Mobile, we have stuff that has been around for 50 years. So we actually have a manufacturing facility physically here at San Francisco Airport. We have 40 buildings that are actually on the airport. We do remanufacturing of aircraft engines as well as heavy maintenance there. It's a long story for maybe a cup of coffee or something of an adult beverage. But when you look at that facility, that has technology that literally was created 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, and we're still using it. And so how do you bring that to the forefront of today's work environment when we're starting to look at employee transformation and workforce transformation to get better information in employees' hands? So for us, the open source point comes from the vendors that have traditionally provided software to us have locked it in some capacity, and they don't see the reason to collaborate, and they're being obstinate about being in the collaboration layer. So what we've done is actually layered in between them and our users open source code often to free that data to them and to create more of a workflow-based process so that the employees don't need to literally go into 5 different systems to order parts anymore. They can do that in a real-time workflow based on a user screen that is an application or an app that we've essentially created for them. That open source layer in between masks all the complexity of the 10 or 15 systems that are running in behind the scenes. So from an employee experience perspective, they get a more modern experience to the point where our employees are actually begging us to do more in that space, as opposed to 10 years ago it would have been, hey, new IT technology, please don't talk to us, we don't want to talk to you.
A quick heads up to the audience, we will be, please feel free to chime in with questions in a few minutes. So just a heads up. But I want to, before coming to you, Ravi, I want to call out a comment made by one of the customers in today's keynote where they want to go with an open platform for local systems. So that kind of resonated with me because, local systems are defined to be local for a reason. They are kind of, we are different, so we want to do things differently. So having that strategy of an open platform is very similar to what you just said, Eric, about the open source being that common facade, right?
Exactly.
Ravi?
No, I think I exactly wanted to say that, for example, one of the things that, we are tracking is, again, food safety, right? So if you look at, in the food supply chain, there is so many, different parties, including a farmer who may have like a 2-acre land to you have corporates and many consolidators, distributors in middle. Like when you have that kind of a system and when you want a traceability, again, of course, blockchain is one of the technologies that people are looking into. But for blockchain to work, you need to have the IoT devices to kind of work hand in hand. And imagine this kind of a disparate groups, they are spread across Bangkok, India, and several other countries where the food comes from. So you need to have an open source platform. You cannot have a proprietary system in that kind of a scenario, say that, hey, look, I'm going to kind of roll it out to worldwide and I expect everyone to kind of participate. It's not going to happen unless you have an open source platform, right? So that's one thing. And second thing I want to kind of talk from a Zebra perspective, I think a big believer of open source. And we not only consume, like for example, one of the product that we recently launched is called Smart Pack. So what it does is it's actually an intelligent connected solution for the dock door when the truck arrives to load that. And as you know, most of the trucks actually are not properly loaded. Again, there is 30% of the air that they transport. And with increasing the e-commerce and other things, there's so much of pressure. So what it is that with a connected solution like that, they're able to now exactly load that properly and reduce the 30% air, right? That's one. And second thing is that also they're getting real-time information on the performance of the workers and their safety, and also making sure that the right package is getting into the right truck. So this is all happening real time, right? And in that particular product, we use actually Breadhat open source products, right? So what it means is that we cannot really go with only with the proprietary one. We need to kind of get that kind of an open source code, which gives much more innovative solutions into the whole mix. Right?
I go back to Paul Cormier's comment yesterday that we enable you to do the best innovation no matter what your environment is. So that's kind of where.
Yeah, and last point I would like to add is that not only Zebra actually contributes to the open source too. Some of the products where we felt that hey, look, we can the open source community can do a better job of adopting. So we actually open source some of our proprietary code too. So it's kind of contributing to the society back again.
By the way, Ravi, did you kind of give a subtle hint that next year at the summit we should have a blockchain? I saw you just injected that in there.
Sure. I think, anyway.
Any questions from the audience? Gunther, go ahead. Let me repeat the question. So the question is about workforce transformation. So when you talk AI, analytics, IoT, and so on, there is an immediate rush to, hey, let me rewrite my resume or something. Right? So Gunther asked the question to Eric, but I would welcome all the panelists to weigh in on it. Eric, go ahead.
So for us, there is some hesitation, especially we have a very heavily unionized workforce, as most people know. Our gate agents, basically everybody you see at the airport with the exception of our catering folks are unionized, and so they're extremely sensitive to technology and what that might mean to their jobs on a long-term basis. We look at automation. One of the ways we've actually overcome that, and it was, I'll use the words a little bit unintentional, but when we set our corporate bonus programs, it's actually set on-time performance, profitability, and actually, believe it or not, customer satisfaction rates as well. And so when one of the things we've seen, and we were talking about it before we started today, is that we can now run our airline on mobile devices. We are the only airline that can do that in the world. We can run departure control from an iPhone. All the baggage systems are actually done from an Android, actually a Zebra device that we use. And we use cellular and Wi-Fi, and we also have satellite Wi-Fi available depending upon the location. For those of you who've been following the situation in Puerto Rico, it is extremely sad for a bunch of different reasons. Power is not a consistent component of their infrastructure, and so by using our mobile devices, we are continuing to run the airline. The local employees have embraced their mobile devices because we are the only airline that is efficiently running out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, because we have our mobile devices. They're providing a higher level of customer service for our customers, and in turn, they're getting that feedback. And so one of the things that we see is that when things go south, we're able to operate resiliently on behalf of our customers. That's when the agents actually buy in, and they're continuing to use their devices from an effectiveness perspective. And so they are hesitant up front, but between the bonus scheme that absolutely incents them to do things in that way from an on-time performance perspective, but the second part is they really do see themselves as customer service agents, and that they're providing a great customer service, and that's another tool that we've enabled them to be more effective with.
Sven, any other?
So, go ahead.
So we're actually going through a huge digital transformation right now, and a lot like what Eric was talking about earlier, we have a lot of very, very old systems, very antiquated processes, anything from transport management, terminal management, how we move fuels or lubes between places, using IoT devices to detect where they are, using AI and things like that. We're using a lot of open source technologies, but also, I mean, people are having to change their skill sets. Mm-hmm. This is a different skill set than your developer or IT person of even 5, 10 years ago had. So kind of retooling, relearning, and retraining our people is definitely something that we have to invest in, and it's a culture shift within the company.
Ravi?
I think I would like to add kind of, to what you asked, like, especially when I look at, we serve retail industry as we're talking about here. In retail, I think there is a big transformation that's happening, right? Because of the e-commerce competition, there is so much of change that is happening in the store. Right now, sales associates are basically not people who just move the inventory from the back room to the front room, but they are basically to your example, they are the customer facing people, and they want to provide that service. So we see actually massive adoption. In fact, they are saying that, look, a customer is coming with a mobile device connected, and they know more about our products and our inventory than as a sales associate I know. So basically there is a big push for enabling the sales associate with the mobile device connected with these IoT devices, so that they will have the latest and greatest information, so that they can actually provide the customer experience that the customers are expecting. Otherwise, it will be nobody want to go to retail store if there is no service, right? So I think that's a big pull. That's where we are seeing actually, instead of being resistance, there's actually a big pull on enabling the sales associates.
I'd like to go back to a point Chad made about the revitalization of the skill sets, right? And there is a connection to open source that may not be obvious, as in, so Red Hat, as a principle, we adopt technologies that have received broad adoption in the community. So if you use open source tools championed by Red Hat, talent is not going to be an issue, right? And these technologies are going to change. Believe me, what we are talking about as being modern today, in a few years, it's going to be legacy. So we need to have that ability to continuously change, right? And open source is the only channel to have that type of continuous innovation and transformation. So if you go open source, you're good on talent. That's a point I wanted to bring out, right? Go ahead.
What do you guys see in the industry as far as IoT applications that use LTE or will use 5G? What percentage do you think that's going to grow?
It's going to grow exponentially in our world. I mean, especially when we have things that are not connected to the internet in countries that barely have internet. I mean, we're using satellite, and I mean, 56K connections are not unknown to us.
Yeah.
I think the question was about, how LTE, 5G, and, from a telco networking perspective, how do they actually impact IoT? So I just wanted to repeat that.
Yeah, I think the biggest impact is a little hidden, especially with 5G, is that as you get software-defined infrastructure within the telcos, you're going to see these virtualized workloads being hosted in cell towers. So you're going to, instead of having a physical device, you'll have a virtual device or a containerized device that is inside a cell tower that's a mile from an oil well or a facility, rather than having to have physical hardware. There will be instances where you do need physical hardware, but for that true intelligent gateway capability as a software appliance, I think it makes more sense. You may have a communications gateway that's connected to a legacy device that has a 5G modem in it that then communicates, and there's a software appliance that's an intelligent gateway that's doing data processing, routing, normalization, and running applications. So, I think that's going to be the real game changer. We're sort of, the death of non-LTE, the end of 2G is really going to push a lot of companies to move into LTE, and then 5G is just going to, these things eventually don't make sense to operate yourself when you can pay a telco to run your network and to run all this stuff, especially in retail or in transportation or distributed applications. It's going to make a big difference.
So we have less than 5 minutes left, not even. So I'm going to request all the panelists to closing comments. And while you're at it, if you want to share something special about the enterprise you represent, go for it.
I would just say for us, we're definitely, I'd say, on a journey. And so we've been doing some of what we now refer to as IoT for the last probably 15 years with GPS tracking of our equipment and so forth. IoT's really just become in the mainstream and become sexy in the last 5 years. But most of us have been doing some component of it and along the lines. And so my encouragement to everybody is just, even if you're not in that game or you want to up your game, pick an area, do some test and learn, and figure out what you need to do to actually improve your customer service component of it. My plug on the airline side, I'll actually give 2 quick ones. One is we are the largest carryout of San Francisco, so hopefully you guys all flew in and out on us. And the second one is #1 for on-time departures and arrivals for the first 4 months of 2018. So.
Excellent.
So from my side, I'd start with the Exxon Mobile side first. So I think everybody thinks of Exxon Mobile as, we go and you get your gas there. But I mean, really, we are much more than that. So pretty much all the lubrication and all of the windmills that you see around are Exxon Mobil products. Most of the oil that you probably put in your car is probably Mobil 1 synthetic. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, from like a IoT perspective, we've been a big data company before big data was a word, and we've been using IoT before it was IoT. And it's actually refreshing to be into this space now because we're taking things that we had for decades and information we've had for decades and being able to do really, really cool things with it.
I think for us, I think IoT is the core of our business. So we provide visibility, as I talked about earlier. The visibility only happens when the physical events are digitized, and basically we provide a digital voice to the physical events, right? So IoT is core to us. And again, some of the tips I think we talked about is that we need to kind of have a business use case and then have the right infrastructure in place. And end of the day, you need to say that how are you going to use the data that is going to come out of this IoT device for making meaningful decisions. And the decisions could be, people when they think of decision, it's not the big decisions, but it's a small day-to-day decisions that you need to enable your edge worker. I think those are the things that you need to think about. So I think then it will be a real successful story. Then again, talking about Zebra, I think I don't know, not many people know about that we actually serve the 95% of the Fortune 500 companies. Are our customers in all the 4 verticals. And I think we have seen the biggest growth in the healthcare sector. Right, adoption of the IoT in the hospitals because there is so much of expensive equipment in the hospitals and also the rooms. So I think these are getting lightened up, lighted basically to kind of give visibility to doctors and nurses on all the equipment and the rooms. So we are seeing so I just want to kind of comment on the healthcare side.
Excellent.
I think what we're going to see is the ITification of operating technologies over the next five plus years. You're going to see IT moving further and further into the core components of the business of a company, and that's going to be incredible and great. It's also risk, there's a lot of risk. I think one of the hidden things that people are becoming aware of are regulatory requirements, privacy requirements, GDPR, data locality. You're going to have an agile enterprise system that's going to be able to handle that stuff. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to operate to the fullest extent. You're going to have to shut capabilities down. So it's having, as you gather this data, having context around it so that you know where it can live, where it can't live, when you need to discard it, how it needs to be encrypted. You need to have this context around all of the data that's gathered so that you can make sure that you handle it ethically and legally.
Absolutely. So my only request to the audience is your feedback on this concept of having multiple customers from multiple industries with Red Hat representation as a session for next year's summit. And you pick the topic. And you please do share your candid feedback on how this went, but any topics, hint, blockchain, or any topic of your choice for next year, please share the feedback because that's the best way to actually build out the agenda for a year from now, or even on the road tours that the summit would take. So with that, I really want to thank the panelists for all the valuable experience-based insights on IoT. Great conversation. We told you a story on IoT. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.